game, and I'm sure Baltimore's up the same mindset. We played these guys most recently. I'm sure we'll have a wrinkle or two. I'm sure they'll have a wrinkle or two. But I'm sure at the end of the day, wrinkles won't determine the outcome of this game. Quality playmaking, particularly in timely moments, will. And so it's important that we formulate a good plan, that we divide the labor up appropriately, and we put our guys in position to do so, make those plays, and prevent those plays on the other side. And I'm sure Baltimore has a similar sentiment as they push forward throughout their week. It is an honor, man, to be in these games, to be in these hotly contested matchups. It seems like Baltimore is always a dance partner. I certainly am respectful and appreciative of that relationship and some of the historic things we've been able to do when these two teams have come together. This appears to be one of those weekends. It's humbling and an honor to be a component of it, but to be a component of it is just that. Our job is to win, and so with that, man, I'll pause and open up for questions.
Mike, I'm assuming since TJ practiced last week that he's been cleared at least to do that. What is the holdup now? Is it up to him, or how he feels comfortable?
Again, he's coming off of a medical circumstance different than the injury circumstance, and so certainly he has a certain level of health, but we want to be, cautious about how we work him back into the fold, and certainly he's done appropriate things in that area as well. And as I mentioned last week, I'm sure you guys will be hearing from him sooner rather than later, directly.
Mike, sorry. Given the circumstances of this game, would you consider using him situationally, or does he need to be back to be a full-time starter?
I'm open to utilizing him in any way that's appropriate relative to his availability.
Mike, does he need to practice fully multiple days this week to be able to go on Sunday?
Practice participation certainly would be more comforting in terms of making the decision, given he's coming back from a medical circumstance.
How would you describe his level of football shape?
I doubt that TJ is ever out of football shape or conditioning over the course of a 12-month calendar. I just know how he lives his life and how he prepares and how thoughtful he is in terms of what he puts in his body and how he trains. And so I don't imagine, that component of it being a major concern.
Mike, is Darnell's injury, it's safe to say that's season-ending regardless of what happens?
He's not available to us this week, and that's really all the information that I was concerned about as we formulate a plan, man. This is a one-week season for us.
He's a unique athlete. How do you sort of compensate for not having him available?
We use a lot of tight ends. We also use guys at the tight end position that don't play tight end, Spencer Anderson. And so we have a lot of options at our disposal relative to that from a strategy perspective, and certainly given 6 or 7 days to prepare, I don't think it'll be a strategic issue in terms of replacing his efforts.
Mike, you said it's humbling to be in games like this, but is it also frustrating to be in this position after having a chance to clinch the division a week ago?
Man, it's a lot of things that you could get frustrated about in our business. I've learned to kind of always move forward. My windshield is much bigger than my rear view. I'm certainly interested in learning from our experiences, but I'm equally as interested in learning from our experiences that happened much earlier in the process. It's all food for growth from my perspective. Frustration doesn't get the job done. I'm singularly focused on putting together a good plan and preparing this group for this awesome opportunity that we have.
Mike, the last time you guys played the Ravens, DK had a really big game, and seeing the way that the Browns played you guys in terms of manning up and not having the success you guys needed in the air, what do you guys have to do in order to try and beat the Ravens without DK? And if they Baltimore, or what do you guys have to do?
If they give us one-on-one playmaking opportunities, we got to make those plays, and we got to put guys in position to do so. We got very capable men. Oftentimes, I say there's a fine line between being a Pro Bowler and a backup. We're at the top of the food chain in terms of the football world. And so it's a reasonable expectation from my perspective, particularly with an additional week to prepare, that we put together a thoughtful plan and that we position our guys to take advantage of opportunities. And if and when they do present themselves, that we make the plays.
Mike, how did TJ look to you in his first week back at practice last week?
Man, I thought he looked great, man. I know he was glad to be out there with his teammates. I think that's a component of it that we don't talk often enough about when someone is injured or out, the isolation component of it. We're a communal group, man. This is a team sport definitively. And so more than anything, I thought he displayed an excitement that comes with being back out there with his teammates.
Mike, last week, when we talked to you, mentioned what Roman Wilson, when he was asked about how to replace DK, and I think later in the week you made similar comments about Roman, yet he only played 9 snaps. What happened? Will that change this week?
You know, particularly when you're not winning third downs, I don't think anyone plays as much as they would like. We've had this conversation many times about running the football. I felt really good about our run plan. I thought we had an opportunity to really control the game through those means, but and we didn't have a bad running day, but we certainly didn't have as good a running day as we could have had we converted more possession downs. And I think the same could be said about levels of participation for guys like Roman and thus their ability to impact the game in a positive way.
Mike, you guys had 16 targets between Valdez, Scantling, and Miller, only 5 for Fryman, 4 for Gainwell. Is there a game planning element that you guys can do to get more targets to the guys who have traditionally been your playmakers, or is that something you just trust Aaron Rodgers to handle?
You know, we certainly draw up enough schematics to spread the ball around. We believe all our eligibles are playmakers. There's a lot of variables that go into how the ball is distributed, and certainly schematic approach and matchups of the opposing teams are a component of that. And so what might have been a story last week or a challenge last week may or may not be a story or a challenge this week.
You talked about you having a bigger windshield and a rearview mirror. Obviously, your lens is different than your players. What do you do for them to try to instill that mindset in them this week?
I display that in my actions, and certainly I embrace that as a leader. You know, there's things that we say, and then there's how we move, and I like to have both aligned. And certainly I'm prepared to display singular focus and preparedness and urgency this week as we lean in on this opportunity.
Can you give an example of maybe how that would be different than a different week?
No.
What kind of response did you see from them yesterday in just the preliminary week meeting?
You know, I don't know that I was looking for a response. Response is kind of action-based. And we were talking about what transpired and why and working on the beginnings of formulating an appropriate plan for this week. And so what we do tomorrow and leading up to the game in terms of our physical labor and the spirit in which we do it will be much more of a determinant of our quality of play and thus our chances of winning than maybe our reaction to a meeting on a Monday.
I'm not asking you to compare Lamar to Huntley as players, but schematically, when you have studied them at times when Huntley has been the quarterback, how similar do they try to use him, deploy him, just within the framework of their offense to when Lamar is the QB?
I think there's certainly some things that are exclusive to Lamar, and that's not taking anything away from Huntley. It's just certain things that are Lamar and no other human on the planet. But largely, I think they play to a certain personality regardless of who's at quarterback, and I think that was on display a week ago. I think they're experienced in playing with Huntley. They know how to play with him schematically, and certainly he knows how to play and has logged some significant reps over his years there. One year, I think he was even a Pro Bowler when Lamar missed a significant amount of time. And so, although it is potentially a backup quarterback circumstance, I think it's some real fluidity there from their perspective. And to be quite honest with you, when things get thick, they play a certain way regardless of who's playing quarterback. And usually the ball is going to go through the big runner, and that's what we expect.
Mike, with this being essentially a playoff game, winner take all, do you approach it differently from a coaching point of view, to the scheme, in terms of maybe taking more chances?
You know, I think that's reflective of December football, and so it's not only playoff winner go home football, but I just think it's as the road gets narrow, as we say in this business, you see people taking calculated risk in pursuit of victory, and certainly we're not opposed to that.
Mike, is that Baltimore running game, is it so hard to stop just because of those two guys, or is it more than that?
You know, it's also quarterback mobility. Oftentimes they force you into an 11-on-11 football because whether or not Lamar keeps the ball or not, there's a threat of him keeping the ball, and that thins out oftentimes your second and your third level of defense when it comes to point of attack running. And so, you know, some things that they do uniquely that others don't. The quarterback mobility is a component of it that makes it unique with Lamar's unique talents, and certainly the unique talents of the big runner makes it a challenge as well.
Mike, what's changed with the rush defense, your rush defense, since that last Baltimore game?
You know, I don't know that a lot has changed in terms of, you know, what we're doing. We've got some player availability that's been improved. Derek Harmon's back, and I think, that's significant, or at least, the significance of his presence has been well documented. We'll see. But I don't know that we're doing anything dramatically different. We're stacking the box when appropriate and making judgments about when that is and when that isn't in an effort to neutralize some of the complementary components. Stability is big, I think, in people. And so, the additions of some of these guys that have missed some time might be helpful to our efforts as well. Certainly I'm open to wrinkles, but at this stage of the journey for us, it's about competing at a high level and being connected. And oftentimes that's with things that you know and know very well, whether you're talking about an individual or about a collective.
There's a chance this might be Aaron Rodgers' last game, depending on how it goes. What has it been like to work with him, and what kind of impact do you think he's made on the organization during the time he's been here?
I don't know that I've taken time to ponder that. I'm just committed to making sure that it's not. He's certainly been an awesome contributor to our efforts, and not only from a talent perspective and an experience perspective, but just his professionalism, his relationship with the game, his love for his teammates, and his willingness to help them grow and get better and gain better understanding each and every day has been cool to be a part of.
Is games like Sunday night one of the reasons you wanted them so badly in the offseason?
As I probably stated several times in the last few weeks, absolutely.
Mike, how much does the outcome of this weekend's game affect how you view the totality of the season as a success or not?
The winner goes on.
And in that case, week 18, high-stakes game like this, is there such thing as home field advantage?
Certainly there is. The ability to change plays at the line of scrimmage, to communicate, to get in appropriate schemes and so forth offensively gets challenged. It's the same urgency that we had when we went into Baltimore several weeks ago. It creates tangible challenges for your offense, and that's why it's so important that you start fast when you're in those adverse circumstances. That's why our ability to go down the field and score on the first possession, for example, in Baltimore a couple of weeks back, I thought was so significant in terms of trying to neutralize some of that. Our job this week is different. But I'm certainly glad that this game is being played in Acrisure.
Is there a message to the fans who've been critical this season to stay highly engaged and energized being the home crowd?
No message at all. That's our job, to make sure that we have the appropriate engagement. And so I'm committed to that component of it.
Mike, your run defense has shut down guys like Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, but you've allowed guys like James Cook and other guys to be explosive. What have you guys done when you've channeled a collective positive effort that's contained in one game?
Maybe it's just Derek Harmon.
Well, one thing on that, Mike, actually, one thing that has come up is a lot of those times where the backs have gotten loose are games where you've also had to deal with a good mobile running quarterback. In those contests, what have you found execution-wise that you could have done better to stop two guys at the same time?
I'm not going to try to paint with a broad brush and assess multiple games, many of which I don't know exactly what you guys are talking about. But, we've had some good games. We've had some games that have not been good in terms of minimizing the run. We certainly understand the gravity of it as it pertains to this matchup, and we're committed to putting together a good plan to work to minimize it, because it is a major component of us engineering victory, no doubt.
Mike, when it comes to fourth and short, are you always aware if it's less than one, more than one, and is that what happened on the fourth and one?
I work to be aware, but replay assists sometimes make some judgments and alters it in some way, and that's why sometimes you'll see me leaving the team box in the effort to get a better view on something after the ball or as the ball is being spotted. But that's just the challenges of the business in today's game, and I'm sure all my peers do similar things.
Mike, after the game in Cleveland, talking with Patrick Queen in the locker room, asked about this high-stakes matchup. He said, if you really love the sport, if you really love the game, you have to be a competitor. How do you see that displayed from your guys, particularly the leaders on this group, as the road gets narrow?
I think we'll write that story, particularly as it pertains to this week when our physical work gets started tomorrow. But if you're asking me, do I have the right guys? Certainly. I think that's what we painstakingly go through when we evaluate talent, be it the draft or free agency. Are they good men? Are they good men who have good relationships with the game of football? Do they love it? When you love it, everything else is generally more fluid.
How much having Aaron can be a calming presence to, you have a young offensive line, guys that maybe aren't, he's had so much experience in these late season games where some other guys haven't. What's that?
I think we benefited from that at every step of the journey. His experience and what he's able to do for a collective relative to thick moments.
Mike, the Ravens had a 200-yard rush game last time against you. Did you have a different feel about your defense, at least then, as opposed to the way you felt after last year's playoff game?
I certainly feel better positioned in 2025 to deal with it than I did in 2024.
We've often talked about how good Pat Freiermuth is against zone. Have you found that to be the case with Jonnu as well? Or is that just kind of the nature of the tight end position? Is he the same way?
He's certainly capable. Whether or not we choose to is another story. We build plans week in and week out in an effort to highlight them, and particularly them relative to what we anticipate from others. And so, some weeks are zone weeks, some weeks are man weeks. Different people are highlighted based on the matchups in those discussions, and so he's certainly capable.
When you guys last faced Baltimore, you guys won despite being outrushed by like 200 yards or something like that. Is flipping that around, or at least mitigating that this time, a big key for making up for the absence of a DK Metcalf? It was huge for you guys in that game.
I think there's a lot of variables that could really affect the outcome of the game in a significant way. Rushing and stopping the rush is certainly. Taking the ball away and preserving ball security is another. Splash plays in the team's game. There's a myriad of variables that could impact how you engineer victory, and that's why we continually always put a bunch of lines in the water and worked all components of the equation in an effort to increase our chances there.
Anyone else?
Mike, after the game, Aaron Rodgers said he has full confidence that you guys will come home and win this game this week. How do you see that displayed from him, and what gives you confidence in him? Again, it's the early portions of the week. We haven't done anything relative to prep. I'm sure will be displayed in how he behaves tomorrow and throughout the rest of the week. As I mentioned before, I'm not surprised. That's one of the things that made him really attractive to us. That can-do attitude and the experience and resume that goes with it. I don't think it's work for him. I think it's as natural as breathing. And so if he's breathing, I expect to see that from him as we lean in on this game.
Mike, you did have two good 2-minute drives you talked about. Is there anything that you can take from those to bring to other parts of the game, or are those situations so unique that it's hard to make a carryover?
There's certainly a carryover from a self-eval perspective, but there's also the defensive schematic component of those situations and scenarios, and oftentimes it depends on, how the defensive signal caller calls it in terms of being able to carry it forward or no.
Anyone?